What started as a routine late-night interview turned into television chaos when Samuel L. Jackson confronted Jimmy Kimmel about his recent controversial comments regarding veteran actors, leading to the most explosive on-air meltdown in talk show history. Jimmy Kimmel strutted onto the stage with his usual cocky demeanor, flashing that trademark smirk that had become increasingly grating to viewers over the years. The applause felt forced, mechanical, as if the audience was going through the motions rather than genuinely excited to see him. He launched into his opening monologue with his typical blend of political jabs and Hollywood gossip, but there was an edge to his delivery tonight, a smugness that seemed more pronounced than usual. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kimmel announced with exaggerated enthusiasm, "we have a legendary actor joining us tonight. Someone who's been in more movies than I can count, and trust me, I can count pretty high." The audience chuckled politely, but the joke fell flat, revealing Kimmel's growing disconnect with his viewers. "Please welcome the one and only Samuel L. Jackson." The curtain parted, and Samuel L. Jackson emerged with his characteristic cool confidence. Dressed in a sharp black suit with his signature style, he walked to the guest chair with measured steps. But those who knew Jackson well could detect something different in his posture, a tension that suggested this wasn't going to be another standard promotional interview. As Jackson settled into the guest chair, Kimmel leaned back with that familiar, condescending smile. Sam, he began, using the diminutive form of the actor's name with obvious disrespect. "Great to have you back on the show. Though I have to say, at your age, I'm surprised you're still doing action movies. Shouldn't you be thinking about retirement?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Jackson's eyes narrowed slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Age is just a number, Jimmy. Experience is what matters in this business. Something you might understand if you'd been doing this longer than a decade." Kimmel's smile faltered, for just a moment before returning with increased intensity. "Oh, come on now. Don't be so sensitive. I'm just saying maybe it's time for the older generation to step aside and make room for fresh faces. The industry is changing, and frankly, some of these veteran actors are just holding up progress." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light-hearted banter they expected from a late-night talk show. Jackson's jaw tightened, and he leaned forward slightly, his voice taking on that familiar edge that had made him famous in countless films. "Fresh faces?" Jackson repeated slowly, his tone dangerously calm. "You mean like the manufactured personalities that networks push because they're easier to control? The ones who don't have the backbone to stand up for anything meaningful?" Kimmel laughed, but it sounded hollow and nervous. "I think you're being a bit dramatic, Sam. This is entertainment, not Shakespeare. Sometimes I think you actors take yourselves too seriously." The dismissive comment was the spark that lit the fuse. Jackson's eyes flashed with genuine anger, and his voice dropped to that low, menacing tone that had terrified audiences in dozens of movies. "Dramatic? You want to talk about dramatic? How about a talk show host who thinks he's more important than the guests who built this industry? Who thinks he can disrespect people who've been working since before he knew what a camera was?" The tension in the studio was palpable now. Crew members exchanged worried glances, and the audience sat in stunned silence. Kimmel, realizing he had pushed too far, tried to backtrack with nervous laughter. Hey, let's just calm down here. I was just joking around. You know how this works. It's all in good fun." But Jackson wasn't having it. He stood up abruptly, his full height imposing and intimidating. "Good fun? Is that what you call undermining people's careers and contributions? Is that what you call respect?" Kimmel remained seated, trying to maintain some semblance of control over his own show, but his discomfort was obvious. "Look, Sam, I think you're overreacting. This is live television. We're just having a conversation." "A conversation?" Jackson's voice rose slightly, carrying that unmistakable authority that commanded attention. "This isn't a conversation. This is you trying to belittle someone for cheap laughs. You've been doing this for years, Picking on people you think can't fight. Back, the accusation hit its mark. Kimmel's face flushed red, and his carefully constructed persona began to crack. That's not fair. I treat all my guests with respect. You're being way too sensitive about this. Jackson pointed directly at Kimmel, his finger cutting through the air like a blade. Sensitive? I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've earned my place here through talent and hard work, not by making jokes at other people's expense. And I won't sit here and let some late-night host who thinks he's untouchable disrespect me or anyone else. The studio audience was completely silent now, watching this confrontation unfold with a mixture of fascination and horror. This wasn't scripted television. This was raw, unfiltered emotion playing out in real time. Kimmel, desperate to regain control of the situation, made what would prove to be a catastrophic decision. "Listen, Sam," Kimmel said with a condescending chuckle, leaning back in his chair with false confidence. "Maybe this is exactly why people are getting tired of actors like you. You can't take a joke anymore. Everything's too serious, too political. Maybe that's the real problem with Hollywood these days." The words hung in the air like poison. Jackson's entire demeanor shifted, his famous composure finally cracking. The legendary actor who had commanded respect in boardrooms and on movie sets around the world was not going to tolerate this level of disrespect on national television. "Tired of actors like me?" Jackson's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "You mean actors who actually have talent? Who didn't get their jobs by kissing up to network executives? Who earned their place through decades of hard work instead of making cheap shots at people who are actually respected in this industry?" Kimmel's face went pale. He had clearly expected Jackson to back down, to play along with the usual late-night television dance of manufactured controversy, followed by good-natured resolution. Instead, he found himself facing a man who had no intention of backing down from anyone, especially not a talk show host who had overstepped his bounds. "Now hold on just a minute," Kimmel stammered, his usual smooth delivery completely abandoned. "I think you're taking this way too personally. This is just entertainment. People tune in to see celebrities be human, to see them taken down a peg. It's nothing personal." Jackson took a step closer to Kimmel's desk, his presence filling the entire studio. "Nothing personal? You just questioned my entire career, my age, my relevance, and now you're telling me it's nothing personal? Do you have any idea what it takes to maintain a career in this business for as long as I have? Do you understand the sacrifices, the dedication, the constant pressure to prove yourself over and over again?" The cameramen were frantically adjusting their shots, capturing every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. The producers in the control room were in panic mode, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let this train wreck continue to unfold. But Jackson wasn't done. "You sit behind this desk every night, making jokes about people who have more talent in their little finger than you'll ever have. You think because you have a television show, you can say whatever you want about whoever you want. Well, let me tell you something, Jimmy. Respect isn't something you can script. It's something you earn." Kimmel's desperation was becoming more apparent by the second. Sweat was forming on his forehead, and his hands were shaking slightly as he reached for his coffee mug. "Look, I respect you, Sam. I've always respected you. This is just how late-night television works. We roast people. They roast us back. Everybody laughs, and we all go home friends." "Friends?" Jackson's laugh was cold and humorless. "You think we're friends? You think any of your guests consider you a friend after you humiliate them for ratings? You've built your entire career on making other people look foolish, and now you're surprised when someone calls you out on it?" The audience was completely transfixed. Many had their phones out, recording this historic moment. They knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Social media was already exploding with clips and commentary, but inside the studio, time seemed frozen. Kimmel made one last desperate attempt to salvage the situation. Sam, please, let's just take a breath here. Maybe we got off on the wrong foot tonight. Why don't we start over? Talk about your new project. Keep things positive. Jackson stared at him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he shook his head. You know what, Jimmy? I think I'm done here. I came on your show tonight to promote my work, to have a professional conversation. Instead, I found myself dealing with someone who thinks his platform gives him the right to disrespect people who've been working in this industry since before he was relevant. The studio fell into an even deeper silence, if that was possible. Every person in the room could feel the weight of what was happening. This wasn't just an argument between two celebrities. This was a moment that would define both of their careers moving forward. Kimmel's voice cracked slightly as he made one final plea. Sam, come on, don't do this. We can work this out. This is live television. Think about what this looks like. Jackson's response would become one of the most quoted moments in late-night television history. What this looks like? Jackson's voice carried the full weight of his decades in Hollywood, each word delivered with surgical precision. This looks like a man standing up for his dignity. This looks like someone who refuses to be treated like a circus act for your amusement. And frankly, Jimmy, this looks like something that should have happened a long time ago. The legendary actor straightened his jacket with deliberate calm, his movements controlled and purposeful. You want to know what I think about when I think about this? I think about all the talented people who've sat in this chair and smiled, politely while you made them the punchline of your jokes. I think about the young actors who come on these shows because they have to, because it's part of the game, and they leave feeling smaller than when they arrived. Kimmel was visibly sweating now, his carefully styled hair beginning to show signs of the stress he was under. Sam, please, you're making this into something it doesn't need to be. I never meant any disrespect. This is just television. Just television? Jackson repeated, his tone dripping with disdain. That's your excuse? That's how you justify treating people like entertainment objects? You hide behind "it's just television" while you chip away at people's dignity, night after night, show after show. The control room was in absolute chaos. Producers were shouting conflicting instructions, some wanting to cut away, others recognizing the ratings goldmine they were witnessing. But on stage, the confrontation continued to build towards something's unprecedented. Jackson moved closer to Kimmel's desk, not in a threatening way, but with the presence of someone who commanded respect in every room he entered. Let me tell you something about respect, Jimmy. It's not something you can fake with a smile and a handshake. It's not something you can manufacture with scripted banter and rehearsed comebacks. Respect is earned through how you treat people when the cameras are rolling and when they're not. Kimmel's desperation was becoming pathetic. I do respect you, Sam. I respect all my guests. This show has always been about having fun, about connecting with people. Connecting with people? Jackson's laugh was sharp and bitter. You mean exploiting people for content. There's a difference between connecting and using someone as material for your monologue the next night. You've turned interviews into ambush sessions, and you wonder why people are starting to see through it. The audience was completely captivated, many leaning forward in their seats. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was a masterclass in calling out toxic behavior, delivered by one of Hollywood's most respected figures. You know what the worst part is? Jackson continued, his voice rising slightly for the first time. You actually believe your own hype. You think because you have this platform, because you have these ratings, that you're somehow above criticism, that you can say whatever you want about whoever you want, and they'll just smile and take it because they need the publicity. Kimmel made one more desperate attempt to turn the tables. I think you're being unfair here, Sam. I've had thousands of guests on this show. Most of them have a great time. Maybe the problem isn't with me. Maybe it's with how you're interpreting things. The moment those words left Kimmel's mouth, everyone in the studio knew he had made a catastrophic mistake. Jackson's eyes flashed with a fury that had been building throughout the entire confrontation. "Are you seriously trying to gaslight me right now?" Jackson's voice was deadly quiet. "On live television, in front of millions of people, you're going to try to make this my problem? You're going to suggest that I'm the one with the issue?" The studio felt like it might explode from the tension. Jackson took a step back from the desk, and for a moment it seemed like he might walk away. Instead, he turned back to face Kimmel directly. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is the manipulation, the deflection, the refusal to take responsibility for your actions. You create a hostile environment. You disrespect your guests, and then when someone calls you out, you try to make them look like the unreasonable one." Kimmel's voice was barely above a whisper now. "Sam, I think we should probably wrap this up. Maybe this isn't the right time or place for this conversation." Jackson's response was swift and final. "You're absolutely right, Jimmy. This isn't the right place for this conversation, because a real conversation requires mutual respect, and you've made it clear that's not something you're capable of providing." With that declaration, Jackson began removing his microphone, his movements deliberate and final. The sound of the mic-pack hitting the desk echoed through the silent studio like a gunshot. "Sam, wait!" Kimmel called out, his voice cracking with desperation as he half rose from his chair. But Jackson was already turning away, his decision made. The legendary actor paused at the edge of the desk, looking back one final time with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "You know what, Jimmy? I've been in this business long enough to know when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them. Tonight you've shown everyone exactly who you are." Jackson's words cut through the silence like a blade. A man who built his career tearing others down, who mistakes cruelty for comedy, and who can't even own up to his behavior when confronted with it. The studio audience sat frozen, phones still recording, witnessing what would become the most watched clip in late-night television history. Jackson straightened his jacket one final time, his dignity intact despite the hostile environment he'd endured. "I came here tonight as a professional, expecting to be treated like one. Instead, I found myself dealing with someone who thinks his platform gives him license to humiliate people for entertainment. That stops here, with me, tonight." Kimmel made one last pathetic attempt to salvage the situation. "Sam, please, don't leave like this. We can talk about this off camera. This doesn't have to end this way." Jackson stopped dead in his tracks, turning slowly to face Kimmel with an expression that could have melted steel. "Off camera? Now you want to have a respectful conversation off camera? After you've spent the last 15 minutes trying to embarrass me in front of millions of people?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even the camera operators seemed afraid to move, capturing every moment of this historic confrontation. Jackson shook his head slowly, a sad smile crossing his face. "This is the problem with people like you, Jimmy. You think you can say whatever you want when the cameras are rolling, then smooth things over with a private conversation afterward. You think respect is something you can turn on and off depending on your audience." Jackson began walking toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the unnaturally quiet studio. Behind him, Kimmel sat slumped in his chair, the full weight of what had just transpired beginning to sink in. His show, his reputation, his carefully crafted image, all of it crumbling in real time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jackson called out, addressing the stunned audience directly, "thank you for witnessing what happens when someone finally says, 'Enough is enough.' When someone refuses to smile and play along with behavior that should never be tolerated, especially not on a platform that reaches millions of people." The audience began to stir, some starting to applaud, others still in shock. Jackson raised his hand, acknowledging their support before delivering his final words. "To all the young actors out there watching this, you don't have to accept disrespect for the sake of your career. You don't have to laugh at jokes made at your expense. You have the right to demand better, to expect professionalism, and to walk away when that standard isn't met. With that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Jimmy Kimmel live stage with his head held high, leaving behind a host whose career would never recover from this moment. The cameras continued rolling as Kimmel sat alone at his desk, the weight of his actions finally catching up with him. The studio fell into complete chaos as Jackson disappeared through the exit. Producers rushed onto the stage, audience members were on their feet, and social media exploded with reactions to what they had just witnessed. Within minutes, hashtags supporting Jackson were trending worldwide, while clips of the confrontation spread like wildfire across every platform. Kimmel, realizing his show was in ruins, made a feeble attempt to address the audience. "Well, folks, that was unexpected. Sometimes these things happen in live television." But his words felt hollow, pathetic even, after what had just transpired. The damage was done. By the time the show limped to its conclusion, Jackson's walkout had already become a cultural phenomenon. Media outlets were scrambling to cover the story. Fellow celebrities were voicing their support for Jackson, and viewers were canceling their recordings of Kimmel's show in droves. In the days that followed, Jackson's principled stand became a rallying cry for respect and professionalism in the entertainment industry. His refusal to tolerate Kimmel's behavior sparked conversations about power dynamics in Hollywood and the responsibility that comes with having a platform. Meanwhile, Kimmel's ratings plummeted as sponsors began pulling their support, and A-list celebrities declined invitations to appear on his show. The confrontation had exposed something toxic that many had long suspected, but few had been willing to address publicly. Samuel L. Jackson had done more than just walk off a talk show stage. He had sparked a movement, proving that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, regardless of the consequences.